again then guys, and welcome to episode 25 of Import Nights, the review series for the JDM performance cars of GranTurismo, mostly sports coupes, but with occasionally some vehicles which fall into other categories as well. Now this particular vehicle is one which kind of bridges the gap between a couple of different types of car. It looks much more like a pure sports coupe, something that would typically have rear-wheel drive or all-wheel drive being a Mitsubishi, but it doesn't. It actually has front-wheel drive. And that allows this car to potentially have some interesting characteristics in terms of handling, and also potentially some interesting advantages or disadvantages over similar looking or similar spec vehicles. Now the vehicle is the Mitsubishi Eclipse GT, the newer shape Eclipse, and this car is one of the quickest front-wheel drive vehicles on GranTurismo. It's up there with vehicles like the Dodge Neon. It has a very similar speed, in fact, to the Nismo LM car, which is also, of course, front-wheel drive. It's a seriously quick machine, this car. Now, as far as raw spec, you get a pretty decent-sized engine, a 3.8 litre, which you can supercharge up to 587 horsepower. Decent engine, not necessarily as decent power though. Given the size of that engine, you'd probably expect more. So, although you don't get as much power as you'd probably want, or assume, perhaps rightfully so, you do get a pretty decent amount of torque. The torque figure on this particular car is actually very high, 527, which is much higher than if it were, for instance, a 2-litre vehicle. You'd have more like 400 foot-pounds, which is the kind of torque that an Evo or an Impreza would have. For the cash, though, which in the case of this car is exactly 25 grand, that's a pretty decent amount of power and torque to have. Now the fact that it is front-wheel drive helps to keep the weight a little lower than it would have been otherwise, because it's a reasonably large vehicle with a reasonably large engine and a decent spec, so it could easily be a heavy car. But it's not overly heavy. It weighs 1,260 kilos with the full weight loss package, which certainly is no Integra, but isn't heavy either. That's a little bit more than, say, a WRC rally car, for instance. That's not too bad. The horsepower per tonne is reasonable. The extra 100 or so kilos over other average size coupes does hurt it a little bit there, but 466 horsepower per tonne isn't bad, strictly speaking. The PP on this car is around where you'd probably expect it to be, 567. That's appropriate for this vehicle, for its power, its torque, its weight, etc. And I wouldn't really complain about that PP level. Now the question is though, for its spec, for its price, etc., is it a good all-round vehicle, or is this something which is much more niched and more specialised? Because, as I already mentioned, of course, the top speed on this car is very good, around 235-ish miles per hour, which for a front-wheel drive vehicle on GranTurismo is very high. Well, it is certainly best at top speed racing. That is where this car really shines. It's one of the best, in fact, in that regard, if not the best, as far as street cars go. As far as other abilities, though, it's not as outstanding. The acceleration isn't bad, especially once you're already moving, so rolling starts are pretty good, but off the line, of course, putting 587 horsepower through the front wheels, it's going to wheel spin. Of course it is. Even vehicles with far less power going through the front wheels will spin. So, suffice to say, for short distance drags, it's not really the car to go for. For longer distance ones though, and for top speed racing of course, it's definitely a sure bet to go for. What about around the track? Well, the little bit of extra weight, due to its size and spec, is noticeable, and the fact that it is a little heavier and bulkier, coupled with the front-wheel drive understeer that's pretty much naturally there with most front-wheel drive cars, doesn't really make it ideal as a track car. It can be used as a track car, as you can see in the video here. It can get around the Nürburgring Ring in a decent enough time. It's just not really suited to that. It's not a track-going vehicle. It could have been. This could have been Mitsubishi's equivalent to something like a Supra, but it's not. The older Eclipse, I would say, is a superior track car to this vehicle. Far superior, in fact. But in a straight line, this car really does shine, especially for 25 grand. That is dirt cheap considering how good this car is within its own little niche. As far as front-wheel drive coupes go, it's up there with things like the Honda Accord Coupe, which is also extremely quick in the front-wheel drive category, but doesn't necessarily have the kind of acceleration that this car can have. So overall, it's not a vehicle that I would recommend for much track use, not unless it's a wide open track which allows you to use this car's advantages, but for straight line performance, it's a really great car to have. It looks the part, it handles decently enough for most tracks, and the straight line performance is great for the most part. So overall, the Eclipse GT isn't going to worry something like an Evo anytime soon in most circumstances, but it's definitely not a bad car, and for the money, if you're a fan of the Eclipse or of Mitsubishi in general, or just Japanese performance cars, the Eclipse GT of this particular generation does offer a slightly different approach and overall package to some other similar vehicles. But that's it overall for this pick. I'll see you guys next time, and as always, thanks for watching.